Greetings, happy Sunday. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to do one of these, but here we are. It's Sunday morning, grabbing some breakfast before I got work today. It's been pretty busy. Been busy house hunting and looking for land, just basically making plans, moving away from the East Coast and looking towards more or maybe the middle of the country or maybe a little bit more south to enjoy some better weather. It's still cold here in Nebraska. And what I wanted to discuss was a lot of people complaining, talking about the collapse of America, how America's collapsing, or things are worse than they're telling you. And of course, the people are upset. They're upset about the inflation. They're upset about potential wars or the war that we're already in, etc. People moving away from the dollar. And people are wondering, well, what is the future going to be? Well, the future will be poverty, because all socialist nations end the same way, where the people don't want to work. And as the Apostle Paul said, he who does not work does not eat. And that's basically what many have to look forward to in the future. If you're not willing to work, doesn't matter how old you are, if you're not willing to put in some form of work, well, there's a good chance that you're not going to eat. In most other countries, that's how it is. You go to places in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, they don't have all these welfare programs where people can just opt not to work. They can live these lives of poverty by comparison to those who are working and putting in a hard day's labor, and especially comparative to the rich. That's why many of these people are so rich, is because the welfare, one. Two, there's no competition, because you have the lowest, the lowest labor participation rate in all time. And so when you have people that aren't participating in the labor market, and you have a lot of people that don't want to create businesses because the state wants the ability to manipulate businesses to do what they want, like what you saw with Twitter, right, where Elon Musk took over Twitter, and of course things changed a little bit, or other companies that were like, oh, if you don't take the jab, when you can't come to work, you can't go to the supermarkets, etc. Your kids can't come to our school. And so, like places like in Mexico, they couldn't do that because they don't have like these huge corporations that people are a part of. They actually have a real economy where everybody has to participate in the labor market. And so they couldn't do that. That's why Mexico didn't shut down. That's why Mexico never shut down. That's why they never had any mandates. For the most part. You could go into Mexico, you could cross the border, they didn't care about your vaccine status, you didn't have to wear a mask, they didn't have mask mandates, etc. Because they have a real economy, and the government can't impose their will on the people like that, because they don't control the businesses. They don't control the businesses like here in America. And so people are complaining, that things aren't looking great, the future's not looking great, and it's overwhelmingly as a result of the welfare, because welfare always produces poverty, always. People don't want to work, and then they complain that the government doesn't do anything for us, that the government is corrupt. And it's like, well, to get someone in a political office, right? If I said, hey, I'm a Latino, right? I need you to take money away from these white people that live in this neighborhood where I'm at right now and give it to me because racism or lack of opportunity or equality, etc. For me to be able to find someone willing to do that, that person has to be dishonest to begin with. Because an honest person will say, well, hey, all that you're asking me to do is just steal money from one group of people to give it to you. And that's theft. And taxation is theft. Everybody understands that, or everybody should understand that. So to find somebody, for me to vote for someone, right? It's just like you come to work one day and you're like, hey, what you got there in that lunch bag smells good. And then the other people that are in the cafeteria are like, you know what? We vote to take your food, or to take some of your food. And it's not theft. It's because we voted on it. So it's okay. And so Americans do this, and all socialist nations do this. They look over at you and they say, hey, that's a nice house you got. That's a nice car you got. That's a beautiful wife you got. You're doing pretty well. And we all vote to raise your taxes. And this is what's been going on for a very long time, longer than I've been alive. For almost 100 years, America has been a socialist nation. It started back with the introduction, obviously, of a central bank. Central bank is basically the foundation for welfare. And then, of course, they introduced it to the people in 1935 with the enactment of Social Security Act. Social Security is a welfare. It's the beginning of the welfare state. And it's one of the reasons why America had to go off of the gold standard for first the people in 1935, because the government needed the gold to continue to pretend that the dollar was backed by gold. So they had to steal it from the people, and they made it illegal for you. And then as soon as they took it away from you, they revalued it from $21 or $20, which I believe it was when they offered $20 that they just print. And they said, here, I'll give you 20 bucks. You give me your gold. And then they revalued that gold by 50%. It went from $20 to $30. And so eventually that all went away in 1971. And this is what I talked about with SVBC, whatever, that bank in San Francisco. The perception is all that is left of the dollar. And it's been that way since they got off of the gold standard for the people in 1935. So when America got off of the gold standard for the average person, that dollar was worthless. It was only the perception that people were perceived value. And then that perceived value, when it was removed in the 1970s, 1971, which is where America got off of the global gold standard, where countries could no longer have access to gold. And it was because of the president of France was looking and say, you got a lot of welfare programs. You're fighting a Cold War with the Russians, and you got all this welfare going on. I don't think you got all that gold in that bank. And in fact, I want my gold. Take this dollar back. Take this piece of paper back. And when that happened, the same thing that happened with SVB was that other people, right? When that one investor was like, hey, I want my money. You're not in contact with me. I want to know what's going on with my money. Transfer my money now. And then other people were like, oh, shoot, is there something wrong with the bank? And they had a bank run. And the emperor had no clothes. But every bank is that way. Every bank in America is that way. And it's been that way since 1935. And it's only gotten worse. It's only the perception. And that's what the government is worried about. Once the perception is gone, then the jig is up, right? Same thing that happened with COVID. They kept telling people, you take the jab, you're not going to get hospitalized, you're not going to get sick, you're not going to die. And then people started dying who were jabbed, and then they had to change the narrative, which is why if you were jabbed within 6 weeks, then you were not considered vaccinated. If you were jabbed, but it was over 6 months, and you hadn't gotten a booster, then the hospital did not count you as vaccinated. Because the perception started to change. People were starting to wake up. And so they had to change the narrative. The reason you're getting sick is because you didn't get a booster. And you need a booster every 3 months. And then once all these people started getting sick with Omicron, who were already vaccinated, the jig was up. Because now they had immunity. And the government couldn't push. That's why you don't hear anything about COVID anymore, do you? Because the perception was no longer there. The people were no longer willing to believe the narrative. And so the perception died. The reality for many people that we're in the worst pandemic since the 1900s, that all faded away. Like the mist from the morning, right? As soon as that sun comes up and burns through all that mist, it all disappears. And that's exactly what many of these narratives are. And the dollar has been the same way. And it's been that way probably longer than you and I have been alive. Because it went away in 1935. And it became a reality in 1971 when the president of France called their bluff and said, I want my money. Now, the only reason that America was able to do that was because America pressed Saudi Arabia and said, hey, we'll go to war with your enemies and we'll protect you if you only sell oil in dollars. And that's how America was able to maintain the scam, the perception. Because now all these other countries needed dollars. They wanted to buy oil. Like, hey, I'll buy it in the ruble, or I'll buy it in the yuan, or in the yen, etc. And Saudi Arabia was like, no. So everything else, as a result, also had to be purchased in dollars. So if you wanted to buy wheat, if you wanted to buy corn, if you wanted to buy soybeans, natural gas, etc., also had to be in dollars. And so that's going away more and more countries like China and Russia. And I think just recently, Saudi Arabia is allowing China to buy oil in the yen, in the yuan. And so when that goes away, so now the nations, the perceived value of the dollar is going away. And that all began as a result of, obviously, the inflation. But when Joe Biden threatened Russia and pulled Russia from the SWIFT system. And so now Russia was like, well, wait a minute. I don't have to fund your welfare state anymore. That's fantastic. I don't need to use dollars. I can use our own currency, or I'll use the currency from China. I'll use the yen or the yuan, excuse me. And so that only bodes very badly for many Americans. And so hence a CBDC. That's why you need a CBDC. Because when your country can no longer purchase and create dollars and create currency out of thin air to purchase tangible goods from another country, well, then all you have are shortages. To control those shortages and people just running out and buying everything that's not nailed down, you use a CBDC. And you say, excuse me, sir, when you go to swipe, I'm sorry, you've reached your allotment. You have reached your allotment for coffee, right? You've reached your allotment. And so they can program it to turn your, so you got the money. The government says, hey, we'll give you the money, but we won't allow you to buy whatever you want. And that's the purpose of a CBDC. It's because there's no infrastructure, and all of the infrastructure went abroad, and that worked until it didn't work. And that's where we are today. We also don't have the population. Americans aren't having the kids. And so you have to plunge the people into poverty to force them to have children. That's why Americans that lived in rural area, and I realized it myself. I'm like, I want to go out and buy land. I want to go out and buy land. I've been researching to buy land for almost a year now. And I look at the land, and I go with my uncle who is in Puerto Rico. He came with me to look at some farmland in Pennsylvania. And he's like, it's a lot of work. I hope you're ready. And he's like, you got no kids. You got no free labor. You got no wife. You got nobody to help you. Maybe my brother-in-law, maybe my sisters, but my nieces, my nephews have no interest in doing any of that stuff. So it's very hard to run a farm by yourself. And so it causes people to rethink, do I want to go this route? Do I want to go this route? It's a lot of hard work. And so as a result, this is what will be the future for many Americans. That's why they need to shove people into cities. That's where they're talking about banning natural gas. They're going to ban all of this stuff, for the purpose of saving the planet. But it's all related to shortages. We don't have the population. We don't even have the workers. When I look at the engineers and I look at the repairmen at the hospital, right? I'm here in Nebraska. When I see the repairmen that come to, maybe there's a plumbing issue or we need some equipment repaired, they're all old men. They're all old men. And I'm like, this was my experience as well when I was in Ohio. And I talked to some of the Ohio truck drivers at the hotel that I was staying at when I was working in Ohio, in the hospital there. And he said the same thing. I said, do you see a lot of young truck drivers? And he's like, no, most of them are like guys my age. He was like 55 or 58. And he said, you know what? Most of us drive bikes. And he said, when I go to bring my bike, he says, they're old guys like me. He told me, he's like, I don't see young people, coming up in the ranks to do those type of jobs. And so when all those people retire, right? When that guy that's 58 is a truck driver, and when he retires, there isn't someone coming up behind him to fulfill his role. And so you get shortages. We're experiencing this right now in nursing. There's a huge shortage of nurses. And it's only going to get worse because I believe it's like 56% of all nurses are over age 55. So what's going to happen in 10 years? And it's like that with many industries. And so what people call a conspiracy theorist, they're just trying to control us. And it's like the government is just trying to figure out a way to solve the issue of the shortages. Well, we've got to shove all these people in cities. We have to introduce climate narrative so that people will be willing to consume less because we don't have the infrastructure. People say, well, you have all these people who are already working in this area And I'm like, that might be the case, but we might need to move those people who work in oil, and we might need to put them into manufacturing, which would reduce the amount of people working in oil or in natural gas or in construction, etc. When you have a limited population to work with, you can't just shove them all in one industry, especially when you have less countries, especially big manufacturers like China, that may not want to take your dollars. Or they say, we'll take your dollars, but it's going to cost more. And so you have inflation, which leads to less consumption, which leads to all other industries that you don't need, like electronics and cars, to go down because people are more worried about housing, energy, and food production. And so it dramatically lowers the standard of living for many Americans. And that's what many Americans have to look forward to because you have too many people not working. I was just looking at a stat where currently, and these stats were from 2021, 65% of all Americans are on welfare, or on some form of welfare. 65%. I think it was like 12% of men and 15% of women derive 90% of their income from Social Security. I believe it was 61 or 63% of Americans pay nothing in federal tax. I look at my federal taxes, and that's where the vast majority of my taxes will be. It'll be like I'll get a check for like $4,000 or something, and it'll be like $2 in Nebraska tax, $28 for Pennsylvania state tax. It'll be like $90 for Medicare, $500 for federal. I'm like, holy shit. And that's all welfare, because federal government collects all that welfare money. And that's what the future for, if you're not in a trade and if you're not willing to produce a service, or if you're not willing to produce a product, then the standard of living of people will go down, because that's all an economy is goods and services. And you'll trade those goods that you produce for a service that you need. I don't need nursing, but I did want some coffee. So I'll trade my nursing services so I can buy some coffee. But if I'm not willing to work, and the government gives me money, then I'm not providing nursing. And I'm taking away coffee that someone else is producing. And that's what America has been for a very long time. It's all going to go away. It's all an anomaly. Ponzi schemes work until the jig is up, right? It's not that Madoff wasn't a Ponzi scheme from the very beginning. It's just once people realized it, and that's what's happening. People are just realizing that this whole shit is a scam. The whole monetary system is a scam. And the powers that be, those people who are in power, the corrupted people that you elected to steal money from X, Y, and Z to give you money, well, now they're going to take your money. And then they're going to make you a slave. So people sitting here confused about all the corruption. It's like, well, you had to elect someone corrupted enough, willing to steal money from these people over here to give it to you. So why are you surprised that there's corruption? It is what it is, and this is the state of America, and it's been this way for so long. It's just now it's coming to a fruition, as they say. Right? What is it? What is that old expression? The chickens are coming home to roost? And this is where we are. It was never a system that was designed to last forever. It was nice while it lasted, but the party's over. And people thinking that, it's all going to go back to the way it was, it's not. It's going to get a lot harder. It's going to get a lot harder. And all I hear are people that are just not wanting to work. I see this in the hospital. The people who are already there, that are getting paid, you got travel nurses that are making excellent money, especially by comparison to vast majority of the population. And all I hear is, I don't want to work. Just pay me. Or pay me more. Or I don't want to do nothing. I hear this all the time from nurses. Oh, I worked in this hospital and I sat around all night and I did nothing. And it's like, that's a nice job. To sit around and feel like you're doing nothing and getting paid, $3,000, $3,500 a week to do nothing, to be in essence part of like the top 10% of Americans, and to feel like you're not even contributing. That's a lot of privilege right there. But a lot of these jobs that are paying what they are, they're going to get revalued. And if you're not putting in real work, as the Apostle Paul said, he who does not work does not eat. And that's how it's going to be. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.